Hello everyone. In this video we are going to continue from task 8 of this project 0x04 more functions, more nested loops. So this question here says we should write a function that prints a square followed by a new line. So this is the prototype to the function and we are only allowed to use putchar function to print. Size is the size of the square, which is the parameter that the function is taking. Size is 0. If size is 0 or less, the function should print a new line. Use the character hash to print the square. So let's look at the output first. So as you can see here, when 2 was passed to the function, we got this part printed because it is a square. So we know that a square has what? All its sides are equal, right? That's a square. All the 4 sides of a square are equal. So that's why here we are having what? 2 rows and 2 columns. By just looking at this, you know that this is not, it is not equal actually, but the number of rows is the same thing as the number of columns. So in this case, we are considering it a square. Look at this one here. We are having what? 10 rows and 10 columns. But by looking at this, you know that this is not a square. Because if you look at this, you will know that the length is not equal to the breadth, right? But because we have the exact number of rows as the number of columns, so we are going to consider this a square for now. Okay, so this is a square. So we are asked to print a square, right? A function that prints a square using the what? Using the hash tag here. So we are going to use the hashtag to print. Okay, so one thing you need to know is that this is the size, right? So this size is the same thing as the number of rows and also is the same thing as the number of columns because we are printing what? A square. So if this parameter here, if 10 is passed as a parameter here, I'm supposed to have 10 rows and 10 columns. If 5 is passed as the parameter, right, I'm supposed to get 5 rows and 5 columns. Isn't it? That's where I'll be able to get a square. Right? So it means I need 2 loops to solve this problem. One of the loop is going to keep track of the number of rows and the other is going to keep track of the number of columns. Right? So let's open the file and let's see how to write this problem here, how to solve this problem. So paste. So I need to include I forgot to include the function prototype for this. Hash include main.h. Right, so let me document my Betty. So what's the function name? The function name is print square, right? So I will just say print square, right? So what again? What should I explain? Describe this with? Let me just say print square using the hash character, right? Character. So what again? I need to explain to Betty the parameter, right? At what's the parameter? Size, right? So I need to explain at size. So let me just say size of the square. Size of the square. Then what again? The function is returning a void, so I need to explain my return statement as well. So I'll just say void here. So here I need to copy and paste the function prototype. So paste. Before that, let me go out and paste the prototype inside my main.h. I forgot to do that. Okay, I have it already. Yeah. No, not it, not that actually. So let me just paste it here. When I saw print diagonal, I actually thought it's the function. Oops. I need to make corrections here. So let me just copy this again. Paste. So I need to add my end if here. I removed it. Yeah. So I think this is fine. Let me add for the next task. Okay, the next task we don't need a function prototype. So I think it's okay. Right? So let's go back to our file and begin writing the code. Alright. So how do we solve this problem here? We said we are dealing with squares, right? And here we are given a condition. If size is 0 or less, we should print a new line. So let's deal with this first. So I will say if size is less than or equals to 0. So what are we printing? A new line, right? So I will just say putchar /n. So I'm done with this, right? I will now say else, right? That is if the size is greater than 0, right? If it is greater than 0, then what do we need to do? Like I said, we are going to need 2 loops. The first one will loop over what? The rows, and the second one will loop over the columns. So let me declare the variables I'm going to use for this looping, I and j, right? So let me look for the rows. So I will say for I equals to 1, I can start from 1 or 0. I already told you how to set the condition if you're using 0 or 1. So I will say I, in this case, since I'm starting from 1, is going to be less than or equals to what? N. Sorry, less than or equals to size, which is the size of the square, right? I'm dealing with what? Rows and columns now, right? So I'm doing the iteration for the row now, in which I said the size is the exact number of row and also the size is the number of columns, since we are dealing with squares, right? So here I will now say size, I plus plus. So this will loop over the rows. So I need to now create the columns inside this row, right? So now I have the rows, right? The row has been created, but I need to place what? All these hash characters inside the rows, which is what? The columns. That's what I need to do now. So I need to say for the condition is going to be the same. For j equals to 1, right? J is going to be less than or equals to size because it is the same. The rows and number of column is the same as the size, right? So this is going to be j plus plus. So now I have a loop for what? For the rows and for the column. So what I want is for each iteration of this column, I want to print what? The character hash, right? I want to print the character hash. So I need to say hash, underscore put char, and then I will pass in what? The character hash. This is what I want to print. So it means that the I is used for creating the rows, right? So for I equals to 1, for the first iteration, when it creates the first row, it will jump into this loop, right? So j will begin iterating from 1. So it will check 1 is less than or equals to size, assuming size is 3. Yes, 1 is less than 3. So it will print what? The hash key, the hash character, J will increment. This condition is true, it will print another hash character. J will increment, this condition is still true because size is 3. Then what? Put char will print another hash character. So now we have 3 hash characters printed, right? So if j increment, this condition, j is now 4 and size is 3, so this condition is not true. So it will move out of this inner loop and go out and increment this I now, right? So in its increment I is now 2, right? It will check 2 is less than or equals to size. Size is 3, yeah. 2 is less than 3, so it will jump into this loop again. It will perform the same operation, right? So as you can see, this one is creating the rows and this one is creating the content inside that row, which is what? The column, right? So here outside the for loop, after printing the hash key, I need to print what? A new line, right? The hash character, I need to print a new line. So this means that after looping all of this, as you can see, after printing the content of the first row, before it moves to the next row, that is before incrementing the value of I, it should create what? A new line. Okay, so now let's test this first. Let's run Betty. So Betty is fine. So let's create the test file now. Copy vi, this is it, main.c. Alright, so paste. So let's go up. So it doesn't matter if your test file is not Betty compliant, okay? They are not going to use your test file to compile the program. They have their own file. They've already stated that clearly above. So now let's compile this and let's see. So compile, paste. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run it. So as you can see, we got the exact output here. As you can see here, they also have what? An extra line here. Just look at this. In this case here, this way I highlight, they have an extra line, that is this line here. Okay, so when you look at this, 2 was passed to the function, we are getting 2 rows and 2 columns. Here, when 10 was passed to the function, we have how many rows? 10 rows and 10 columns. If you can count this, we are having 10 rows and 10 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are having 10 rows and 10 columns. And here, because we are having a 0, so that's why we are having what? 0 here, an empty space, an empty line. And because we've set a condition to what? To treat any we've set a condition that if the size is 0 or less, it should just print a new line. So that's how we're getting this. So don't forget to add, commit and push to your GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. So now let's move on to the next task. So this task here says we should it says the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out the 99.5% of programming job candidates who can't seem to program their way out of a wet paper bag. So it says write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100 followed by a new line. But for multiples of 3, print fees instead of the number, and for the multiples of 5, print buzz. So for numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print fees buzz. Each number or word should be separated by a space. You are allowed to use the standard library. In summary, what this question is asking you to do is this. You are to print numbers from 1 to 100. But among these numbers, there are numbers that are multiples of 3 and also multiples of 5. Right? So what I mean by multiples of 3 and multiples of 5 is this. Any number that can be divided by 3 without remainder, then that number is a multiple of 3. Also, any number that can be divided by 5 without any remainder, then it means that number is a multiple of 5. Right? So any number that can be divided by 3 at the same time can be divided by 5 without remainder, that number is a multiple of both 3 and 5. So if a number is a multiple of 3, we are told to type in fees instead of displaying the number. If a number is a multiple of 5, we are supposed to type in buzz instead of the number. And if a number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, we are supposed to type in fees buzz instead of this number. Let's look at an example here. As you can see here, we have 1, 2, right? And then what? 3 here. So instead of having 3, we are printing fees because 3 is a multiple of 3. So that's why we are having fees here. And we are told that if it's a multiple of 3, print fees. So here we have 4, here we have 5. So 5 here is a multiple of 5 because 5 can divide 5 without remainder. So that's why I'm having buzz printed here. Here is 6, right? 6 is a multiple of 3, so that's why we're having fees. So when you go to 15 now, yes, as you can see 15, we have fees buzz. Why do we have fees buzz in 15? Because 15 is a multiple of 3 and 5 as well. Okay, if you divide 15 by 3, you will get 5 without remainder. If you multiply 15 by 5, you will get 3 without remainder. So it means 15 is a multiple of both 3 and 5. And we are told to print fees buzz in such cases. Okay, so now how do we write this function? Sorry, this program. This is not a function, we are writing a program. Okay, so here I'll just say vi. Let me open the file. We are going to do this step by step. So I need to include my standard input output stdio.io.h. Right, so let me document my Betty first. So I'm only going to use my main function here. So let me just call it main function. So just give it another descriptive name. Okay, so here the next thing is what is just the return value. So what is the function returning? It's 0. All right, so here I'll just say int min. So I'll pass in void. So what next? All right, so the first thing we need to do here is simply, we know that we are going to loop from 1 to 100, right? So I'm going to loop from 1 to 100. So int I. So I now say for I equals to 1. I'm starting from 1. You can start from 0. I kept explaining this for you. So what should be the condition? I less than or equals to 100, right? Then I plus plus. So I'm looping from 1 to 100. So inside this for loop, what I need to do is this. I need to check if the number is both multiple of 3 and 5. So I will now say if I, that is for each iteration, it will check is the value of I a modulo of 3, right? If I modulo 3, let me just put them in bracket. If I modulo 3 is equals to 0, right? And also, right? And also I modulo 5 is equals to 0. What does this mean? It means that that particular value at I is what? A multiple of both 3 and 5. Right? If the value of I divided by 3 is not equals to 0, sorry, it's equals to 0, and also if you divide it by 5 it's still equals to 0, it means it's a multiple of both 3 and 5, because we know that multiples of a number is multiples of to get a multiple of number, it means that that number can be able to be divided by 3 without remainder, and also it can be divided by 5 without remainder, right? So here I need to say if this condition is true, what should happen? I'm only interested in printing what? Fees buzz. Right? So if the condition is true, I will print what? Fees buzz. I'm told to use the standard library, that I can use the standard library. So I just say printf. We are printing a string, right? So how do we print string? What is the placeholder for string? In printf, we use %s, right? If you want to print string. So here I will pass in what? Fees buzz. Take note, the F is in caps, the B is in caps. Okay? So I'm printing fees buzz now. right? That's what the condition says. If it is a multiple of both 3 and 5, then we should print FizzBuzz. Okay, so now the next condition is what? Else if, now I can consider if I is a multiple of 3. So I now say I modulo 3. In the above case, I considered if I is both multiple of 3 and 5. So now if it is a multiple of 3, if I modulo 3 is equals to 0, it means I is a multiple of 3, right? Whatever the value of I is at that position is a multiple of 3. So what should we do? I would just say printf. What am I printing? Percentage S. I'm also printing a string here. So what am I printing? I'm printing fizz. If it is a multiple of 3, it says print fizz. Just look at this. Print fizz. Right? Then what again? I need to set another condition. Else if, right? Else if, sorry, I, now I'm checking for multiple of 5. I modulo 5 is equals to 0. I hope you know why I'm using this modulo, because modulo is used to get the remainder of a division, right? So if the remainder is equals to 0, it means 5 has successfully divided it without any remainder, right? So if it is equals to 0, then I will just say printf. Then what should I print here? Percentage S. I'm also printing a string, so I'll pass in what? Buzz here. So this is going to print buzz anywhere there is a multiple of 5. Okay, so what is the next thing we need to do? The next thing we need to do is else. That is, if it is not a multiple of 3, it is not a multiple of 5, and it is not a multiple of both 3 and 5. There are a lot of numbers like that. As you can see, 1, 2, 4, they are all not multiples of 3 and 5. So here I will just say else, right? So what should happen in the else part is simply that it should just print what? It should just print the number, right? So printf, I will just say percentage D, because I'm just printing the number now, right? We are not printing any fizz or buzz. We are printing the exact number as far as it is not a multiple of 3 or 5, right? So I will just say I in this case. Do you get it? So here outside this loop, I can now print my new line. So here I will just say printf, then /n. So here I can now return my function. So return 0. So it means that after the for loop, after the loop finished running, it's going to print what? A new line, and it's going to return 0 to the function. So let's run Betty on this first. Betty 9. Yeah, so Betty is happy. So let's compile this. Let me copy this. Copy, paste. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we are getting 1, 2 fizz, but it is mixed up. It is jam-packed. So I need to give it a space, right? I forgot to do that. So let's open the file 9.c, right? So all I need to do here is, when you look at this, we have spacing after each of these numbers, right? And also the words here. But we are not supposed to leave a space at the end, at the last character, which is supposed to be 100, but in this case we are getting buzz, right? We are not supposed to print a space. So we need to set a condition not to print space after printing the last word here, which is buzz. Right? So all I need to do here is I can come down here after this else part. After this else, I can just give another if statement. I can just say if my value of I is not equals to what? It's not equals to 100, because 100 is the last character I'm targeting. Sorry, is the last digit. We are looping 100 times. So the last iteration, we are not going to print what? The space for it. Right? So that's why I'm setting if I is not equals to 100. So it's not going to include the 100, the last iteration, right? So if it is not equals to 100, I want to print what is space. So I will just say printf, double quote, and then give a space, and then end this. So this will give a space after printing each character, or sorry, each digit and also each word, but it will not give a space at the end of the last iteration, which is 100. Okay, so let's test this. Let's compile. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, now we are having spaces, right? We are having spaces here. So now the last character buzz here is not having a space. So now you can add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository. Then you can run your checks. So this is the end of today's session. In the next session, we are going to continue from task 10. So thank you very much. To meet in our next session.